Hello and welcome to another edition of your favourite podcast, Insane in the Fembrain. Hello everybody. Quickly, coming up Thursday 24th of Feb, it's our birthday show with Rod and Sean. Go to patreon.com/membrane podcast for early access. Oh yeah. That's what we're doing now. The patrons get early access to become a patron. Come and join our gang. Go to the patreon.com/membrane podcast and become a patron. Come join us. Oh yeah. Also check out stylish Insane in the Membrane t-shirts and hoodies from buythatmerch.co.uk and tell them we sent you. That's the lads SOS Clothing doing some wonderful things for us. There's other colours now as well. We had the gold one to start with. Now we've got the red and the green and the black, and it's really nice. Go and have a look. That's buythatmerch.co.uk, and as I said, tell them we sent you. Okay. This week's guest is the brilliant Callie Beaton, host of the fantastic podcast Namaste Motherfuckers. She's also been on QI and various other TV shows. She's absolutely first class. I'd seen her around. I'd seen her online. I'd seen her. I'd seen the name and seen her on various comedy shows and things like that. And then I think it was like sort of the end of last year, we gigged together. We did Up the Creek for the first time. It's the first time I met her, and we hit it off straight away. You know, there was a few things that we were going through at the time that we kind of, you know, we sort of had a chat about, and we were like, you know, we sort of reassured each other that, you know, it might be shit now, but it's going to get better. We had a really nice chat on the DLR coming back into London. So yeah, we hit it off, and I was like, you know what, I'd love to get her on the podcast. So we had a chat. She agreed. I was like, oh yeah, brilliant. And here she is. Coming up in a minute is Callie Beaton.
A podcast from producer Paul.co.uk.
Howdy, how you doing?
I'm good, you right?
Are you picking that lighting now that you're 50 just to make sure you're still looking great?
It's getting darker and darker.
I know, I'll only do clubs with no lights now. I'm like, yeah, that's fine, they can just listen to me.
Yeah, just do it from off stage.
Exactly, it's my best angle.
I didn't realise you were there. I was just waiting. I
you
couldn't
could have
hear
been doing
Paul.
all sorts in that little cupboard.
I imagine, in this spongy little
room.
room.
I won't imagine, because I've not had my cross on yet, so yeah.
Yeah, no one needs that first thing in the morning.
They do not.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I actually am good. People say that, don't they? They say, I'm good. And I'm sad. No, but yeah, I'm doing all right, thanks. How's it going your end?
Yeah, good,
happy
50th.
50th.
Thank you very much.
Did you have a nice one? Did you do lots of celebratory things?
We did, actually. I got to see I had a surprise dinner with my sons. Because I'd spoken to them, and then they were, oh yeah, I'm busy rehearsing, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then I was taken for dinner, and they were sat there. Lovely.
Aww.
Yeah, it was a nice
Remind me
moment.
what age your boys are?
Well, my eldest will be 30 in March, and my youngest is 24.
Okay, yeah, I've got 24. My oldest is 24, so.
Isn't it insane to be the parent of grown-ups?
I know, it's kind of nice, though. I don't know how you found that, but I'm sort of getting used to it now. They say, don't they, you give kids roots and you give them wings. And yeah. I feel like when they fly, it can be quite painful, but then, you know, you've done your job well, don't you? Because they can. So I'm sort of making my peace with that at the moment,
yes.
But they're gone.
It's just
out.
It's just that moment when you realise, because I've been a parent longer than I haven't been. Mm-hmm. And you don't realise, even if you don't, like, because their mother and I split up when we were young, but we were always still around each other. But you don't realise that you spent your entire life caring about the kids, and then one day they don't need you. You still care about them, but they don't need you, and you're like, oh, now what do I do? You have to find yourself again.
Well, it's also that when you have them young, I had mine in my 20s as well, and it is a lot. It's not your identity, because you and I have always done other things, so you know, neither of us are full-time parents. But it's amazing how much it is a part of your identity. And as I was a single mum for my two since they were tiny, so it's kind of just the three of us against the world for 20 years.
Wow.
And then when they left, I was like, oh, it's mighty quiet around here. Yeah.
It really is weird, and nobody has told me about that bit. Nobody. I remember when I had my first one, and there was a couple that we were friends with. Nick, he was this massive biker dude. And so, you know, you'd assume that he'd be, you know, he's a biker dude, you know, the stereotypical, you'd think, but he was a really sensitive man, and he took me to one side and he just said, just so you know, Rich, now she was pregnant, now the baby's here. very few people are going to ask you if you're all right.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah. They just assume you're going to be fine. And I went, oh yeah, okay. It's, and you don't realise when you have kids, because everyone worries about the first one. You worry about having them, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to be? What sort of a parent am I going to be? But instinct kicks in, doesn't it? And you just do things you didn't think you could do.
Well, you love them I remember thinking I'm too selfish to have a kid when I was actually in labour with my first one and I was trying to have a home birth. So I was kind of labouring around the place. And I said to my kid's dad, I said, I just realised I don't really want anyone else in the flat. I kind of like it just being us. I don't really want to share the flat with. He was like, this is not a great moment to be having that realisation. And I really did have a slight panic that I wouldn't feel selfless enough to have a kid. I was like, but I'm quite selfish and I like my boyfriend and I'm working at MTV and we're having a great life and this is going to ruin it. And what you don't bank on is when you see your child, that thing kicks in, whatever it is, and you can be the biggest arsehole in the world, but your kid will come first, and pretty much for everyone, and you would walk across hot coals for your kid. And that's not because we're saintly people, it is just that weird primal thing, isn't it? So I pride myself on being a selfish arsehole who still managed to then translate that into an all right mum.
But it goes to show what kind of a parent you are when other people tell you how great your kids are.
Yes.
It's a real, you go, I didn't do a bad job.
Well, that's funny. I'm sure you had that when yours were younger. I still get it occasionally, but when they're teenagers and they're being awful at home and they're not unloading the dishwasher and they won't even look you in the eye, and then they'll go to a mate of yours house and your mate will be like, oh my gosh, they were so polite. They always make eye. They ate everything. They helped clean up. They helped cook. And you're like, sorry? Oh, so you do have those skills. You're just not rolling them out in your own abode. Nice to know.
That's it. Yeah. All the time.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Save your best for your mates.
Yeah, it is a thankless task, isn't it? A thankless job.
It is, although I don't know, there's something about the adult I'm particularly close to. I mean, I'm close to both my kids, but because I wasn't as close to my mum, it means the world to me to be this close to my daughter, and I do that. She's 21, and that relationship, I think that's how I'm coping with this empty nest phase, is watching what the relationships are turning into.
Yeah.
And there's something pretty cool about having adult kids out there who you get on with, right, and who are part of your kind of people in the world. So I'm realizing you have lost a lot, but you have gained something different. But it is a living loss. I'm sure you've talked about it on the podcast, the idea of living loss and how much that feels like a bereavement. And your kids leaving home is a massive living loss. And I was Googling when my daughter, she moved to Amsterdam when she was 18. And when I got home, I was Googling, does empty nest feel like a death? Because I literally felt like I was like literally walking in. I couldn't go into her bedroom for about 3 weeks. And my mates were like, she hasn't died. She's still alive. It's not a shrine. Your daughter will be back. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, she will. But it did feel like a punch in the guts on a pretty massive level. Yeah.
Of course it is. It absolutely is.
We've gone straight in deep, haven't we, with this shit?
Do you know what, though? It's funny that living loss has never come up. We haven't spoken about it before.
Okay.
And it's something that I think you and I have been around over the last sort of year when we first sort of got talking.
Yes.
We're talking about bereavement, like when you split with somebody. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to someone, so I had counselling and things like that. And I think you did as well.
Yes, I've had a lot of counselling.
Yeah. I think we all need it.
I've had a lifetime of it. I'm an early adopter.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I first had counselling when I was 23.
Okay. Yeah, I had my first sort of lot. Yeah, in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And I think it was just. I didn't. It wasn't the right person for me at the time. I didn't realise that you have to sort of shop around and find the right person sometimes. Because it's all about you're building a relationship with someone, aren't you? So
yeah, it's definitely chemistry, and I think different therapists will do different things for you at different times. I went to see that therapist for a very specific thing that had happened in my life that I needed help getting over, and even though I wish that thing hadn't happened, it opened me to therapy at a very young age, and it definitely changed my life, the therapy, for the better. I don't know how I would have survived mentally if I hadn't happened upon therapy young. But that idea of living loss, I'm quite preoccupied with it at the moment. It's a very helpful way to validate, when you do split up with somebody, depending what happens next, you may never see them again.
Yeah.
And you might have been in bed with them laughing and reading the paper a week earlier. And then I'm acting like it's the 1980s. We all read the paper. We don't have laptops or, phones. But and then they're gone, and you might never see them again. And that is the most phenomenal loss. And if you think about what your brain is going through and your fight or flight mechanism, your whole brain and body and mechanisms are like, that person's died. They've just gone. Yeah. And it is a very visceral fear. So I think the idea that we kind of think we can't feel bad about those things, or we shouldn't because someone didn't die. Of course, somebody dying is a whole other league of a loss. Yeah. But the idea of living loss, which could be kids leaving, could be breakups, could be a massive bit of work that fell apart, could be, I think we all felt living loss in the pandemic, didn't we? We all lost our kind of careers and our purpose. That was a living loss. So yeah, I'm quite interested in it. I do a lot of motivational speaking, as you probably know, and I'm quite interested in that idea at the moment, and how companies I speak to have also suffered that. They've lost people, they've lost culture, they've lost atmosphere. So yeah, living loss. You can have that one on me, Rich.
That's brilliant. I've literally never heard of it before. And I think it's because you're so used to things being as they are. You're going into work and those people are there, like you say, and overnight everything just got taken away from us, didn't it? It was and it was an unimaginable thing that happened. Like no one in a million years we didn't think it was ever going to happen, that we would end up locked in our houses because of something that was in the atmosphere. Yeah,
crazy. We thought that's a shit movie. I'm not going to keep watching because it'll never happen. I remember bumping into Lou Sanders, who lives near me, and I was walking on Hampstead Heath, and I bumped into her quite near the start of the first lockdown. And I was talking to her about work, and she was like, well, at least, the radio's still going and there's bits of telly. And she said, I keep thinking, God, if this had happened 2 years ago, I'd have been fucked because I was just on the cusp. And I was like, you've just described me, Lou. I was just getting telly. You've described where I'm at, and I have just lost everything. And it just felt, I'm not saying, God, there's people who lost a lot more than I did. So sorry, key workers, if you're thinking, yeah, poor you, Callie, you lost a bit of telly. But it did feel like the most massive loss. Do you know what I realised, though? I've always said to my kids about money. I've said, money definitely won't make you happy, but not having enough money will make you unhappy. And there's a big difference. And I realised, just apply that to work, because not getting those shows is making you really unhappy because you thought they were yours. They were in the bag and then they got cancelled. Yeah. But then I thought, but you could be doing those shows and be completely miserable. Life wouldn't. So you're mourning a thing you never had. It wasn't yours. It was about to be yours. And it might not have made your life any better. And when I realised what I was assuming all I was grieving was something I'd never had. And then I thought, okay, that is a bit of an easier thing to square myself up to. Yeah.
I think as well, when something has gone, like we said about when you break up with somebody, what's difficult as well, what is it that that they're still around somewhere, they're still doing things, and your
worst
brain,
of all, they might be happy.
Yeah, and you're like, they weren't happy with me, and now they're happy with someone else, and that's like an extra twist of the knife.
Do you know what really helped me this time? I remember in my darkest moments, because I split up with someone similar time to you. I split up with him in June last year, and I will say this is a slow burn to be getting over him. I've downed my dating tools for a bit after a couple of rebounds because I realised I haven't processed it fully. But I think there is something about, I Googled kind of late at night, how do you get over breakups like at 52? I shouldn't know. And I happened to find something. And one of the things it said was just do not go cold turkey. Don't have any contact with them, and don't go near them on social media. And it was the first time I'd split up with an ex, and I didn't go near anything he was doing on social media, even though it's so tempting and he's all over it. And it was the best decision I made. That is one really important tip, I think. I don't know how you've been with that. It's kind of hard with your setup to not notice, isn't it?
Well, this is it. But we've blocked each other on everything, so that helped. And then I did say to everyone, because someone screenshotted something and sent it to me, and I went, why are you sending me that? And I just thought you'd be interested. I'm like, I'm not interested. I don't want to see it. I've learned early on that, if you go snooping, you're not going to like what you find. Because we were both in the same industry, I was hearing all manner of stuff. And in the end, I just said to everyone, I went, I don't want to know. Can you just not tell me? Don't show me things. I don't want to know. We've got to make a clean break. It wasn't working. We're better off away from each other. We both realise that now. But I still don't want to know what she's up to. I just don't want to know. But, you know.
There are people where it's always going to hurt, and I think realising that as well, that someone said to me about breakups, you can tell I'm about to do a speech this afternoon, you can tell I'm in full motivational speaker mode, because right from this I'm driving off to do one. But one of the things that someone said to me is relationships, they're not that you broke up because it was broken, and it's complete. You see the relationship as complete, so it's not a kind of failure, but you completed that relationship. And I thought that's actually a nicer way. It's not a kind of notch on the failure dial, you know, you just it ended. But there are also relationships that if getting over something, I don't know if you listen to the podcast, what would your shrink say?
No.
And they had one about how long it takes to get over somebody and let go. And they said, well, it depends what you're asking. If what you're asking is when will it never hurt? When will I never care about this person? That's probably never. If you're asking when can I let go of being in the grip of this kind of grief, that's something you have a choice about. But to sort of know that person will always be a bit somewhere in you, I think that's almost a relief, because you're not going, oh, I've just got to not give a shit and be really happy for them that they end up married to someone that they look like they really love. You know, it's all right not to feel like that, isn't it? So what I'm saying is I'm still in the thick of an absolute shit show of a breakup, Rich. That's really what I'm trying to say. It's a hot mess over here.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. There was a time when in between when we broke up and then the rest of the year, like when I last saw you, and I was in the middle of it then, and the turmoil.
We were nearly crying on the DLR, weren't we? Trying to hold it together. The young people are like, look at that middle-aged couple crying.
We look like a couple breaking up.
Exactly. Tenderly.
Yeah.
And with love.
But there's a moment where you just go, I'm never going to feel right again.
Yes.
Even though when we were together at the end, it was awful. There was always a glimmer of hope. I'm like, we're going to work this out. We are going to work this out because there's love there. And then when you come through all that, I'm never going to be the same again. You come through the other side and you kind of go, actually, I think that was the best decision. You know, because we were both miserable, but we hadn't really faced up to it.
But that's kind of heartbreaking when there's still the that's where I'm at with my one. It sounds like a very similar thing. It just didn't work. But we totally loved each other, and we still do. And when you know that's out there, you're like, God, it's quite hard to find somebody that you love and where all the stuff you want from somebody's there. Obviously not all the stuff, or we'd be with them. But there's also you and I had a sort of text exchange about age. I have realised though there's something very liberating about having a 5 at the start of your age, because any notion of I better find someone by that age, or no, I'm like, it really doesn't matter if I meet someone at 53 or 63. Like, what is the difference? There's no clocks ticking. And actually that's felt really good. I'm like, if you think you're going to lose it, you know, you have this thought, don't you? 50 will come in like a guillotine, and I won't be able to, no one will find me attractive, and I won't want to do this. And then you realise, no, I just feel exactly the same as I did when I was 49, only a bit less scared of a milestone that didn't matter. And then you can just crack on and realise, well, there's no rush, got all the time in the world. Couple of, you know, lovely candidates like us, who could resist, Rich?
Bloody right, mate. But it's funny that, because time, I was talking about this the other day and it sounded insane what I was saying, but time doesn't exist. Like the numbers isn't really, like, you don't get to 50 and then suddenly things start dropping off. You are aging anyway, like a flower, like anything else that is born and grows and then dies. You know, it's just a thing. But there are still people that go, oh, you're in your 50s. Well, yeah, and you're past it then. Yeah, we don't want to know. And you had, you had that very thing. You did a show about it.
I did, Invisible, because that French guy, there was for any of your listeners who don't know, there was a French man called Yann Moix who was 50, a kind of B-list guy, and he made global headlines because he said a woman at 50 is invisible and that he would never date a woman at 50, that a woman at 25's got a hot body, a woman at 50 does not. He then, to be fair, every hot 50-year-old woman on the planet, of whom there are millions, was posting pictures of their, not literally of their ass, but, you know, hot pictures. And in the end, he was like, please, could everyone stop, you know, trolling me with their hot pictures? But I just thought, you know, it's a thought that you kind of put on yourself, isn't it? That that might be a thing, and that you might, I think you do assume it, and people do talk a lot about invisibility, particularly women, that men turn into these kind of silver foxes and date younger, which is the way society is. A lot of older men do date younger.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that is not the same as saying women my age can't date younger, date who they want, be attractive. But I don't know if you have this, but when people hear my age, and on stage I still say I'm 50, mainly because I've got a good gag about my 50th birthday, but I'm about to be 53. Not that that matters at all in real terms. But when people come up to me after gigs and go, oh my God, you don't look like you're 50. First of all, I'm thinking, well, I'm not. And second of all, I'm thinking, well, that's because you don't know many 50-year-olds then, because I don't know about you, but the people I know our age are just like, they look good, they're doing stuff. Like, I don't think we're the anomalies. I think most people, we're thinking of like what people in their 50s were when our great auntie Dora was in her 50s and life's moved on a bit. So people do have this assumption, don't they? Like, oh, right, that sounds old.
Yeah.
I've decided nothing's going to sound old till I'm 80. That's when I'm accepting old. Until then, young.
Well,
I'm in my second act.
It's funny when I remember I used to listen to Bill Burr's podcast quite a bit, and he'd always talk about himself like, I'm an old fuck. And you're like, no, you're not. What are you doing? He's like, oh, well, I'm an old man now and I'm this. And I'm like, no, it doesn't mean it's over. What are you on about? You're just where you are. You don't have to start, buying into the stereotypes, of like cardigans and,
Well, certainly you can't wear an ironic cardigan. That's something to note in your 50s. What was ironic and Hoxton now just makes you look like an old dodger. What do you think, though? You must see this a lot, that people will be like, stand-ups will be on the stage going, and I'm 33 now, and, so now when I get up off the couch, something creaks, and I've realised that instead of going to the pub, I want to have a cup of tea, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? That is not old, and I'm 20 years older than you, and I do not feel like that. Nothing creaks, and I still would sooner go out than have a cup of tea. So there's that perception of age, isn't it? Like what it is. Yeah. Yeah,
I think it's that. Someone said to me, like, the day that you say I'm old is when you become old. If you start talking in that way. But what I did find as well, like, I had people saying to me, why do you keep telling people how old you are? Because of the industry that we're in. They're like, what? Stop telling people, because it's people that we know that have got a stage age. There are a lot. There's a lot
of people, and who've got twins who are 2 when their twins are actually 27. There's a few of those around as well. Yeah, because the gag still works.
Yeah, but it's still in this industry. There is that, like, especially, and I've had this conversation with many women. They say they are they're terrified of getting to 40 because they're like, it'll be all over.
The thing I do think about that, though, is I sent you that thing about the U-shaped happiness curve, which is, I can't remember the guy who came up with it, but it's basically the evidence scientifically and neurologically that from the age of 25 until our 40s, we are on a downward curve of happiness. And from our 50s to our 80s, we are back on an upward trajectory. And my own personal experience so far would say there's definitely something in that. But what I would also say is that we sort of limit ourselves a bit as well. So I'm not saying that, there isn't a patriarchy. I'm not saying there isn't ageism. I'm not naive. But I do also think that we can decide what is going to limit us and what isn't. And I know that I was feeling, when I lost all that work, as we all did at the start of the pandemic, it was the year I'd turned 50. And when I was starting to get all those telly things and radio stuff, I was thinking, God, I'm really lucky that as a newcomer at 50, people are giving me a break on telly. I'm so lucky. And then when it all fell away, I was like, well, I definitely won't get that back. I was lucky enough. Well, here I am, pretty much all of it's come back. And I'm like, and now I'm about to be 53 and no one gives a shit. And I think, so honestly, I'm not saying ageism isn't a thing, but I also think I was setting a lot of limits on myself and saying, well, now I'm this age, this can't happen. And it's like, well, maybe it can. And maybe just don't make those assumptions. And I do think that it may be harder to get onto things when you're a certain age. But at the end of the day, if you're good on them, you're going to get asked back. And if somebody who's younger and fits the demographic better isn't, they won't. Yeah. So I'm not being glib about it, because there'll be people listening going, well, fuck you, I haven't had a chance at telly and I haven't had a chance at radio and I'm great. And that will be the case. But I'm determined this year to think less about age, even though we've just spent 20 minutes talking about it. But I think it's because really we need to get out of our own way. Like, what are we saying we can't do or we can do, and what is possible? So the real world's out there, but but why are we so preoccupied with age? But you've just turned 50, and that's a big one, Rich. Like, anyone who's just turned 50 is going to be thinking about turning 50. It's a massive, it does feel massive. But how do you feel now? So you're a few days into being 50?
Yeah.
How did you feel when you woke up 50?
It was almost a relief. It was like, all right, I can stop worrying now. It's happened.
I had exactly the same.
Yeah.
I felt so good the day I woke up 50. And then my kids threw a sort of surprise bit like your thing. They sorted stuff out for me. And I just felt like the most massive weight was off my shoulders, and it's kept off. It's a lovely feeling.
Yeah. And I was looking around. I was looking at my wardrobe, and because I'm I'm a big thing about shoes. I think shoes say so much about a person, and I love it. So I've got loads of pairs of trainers and things like that. And I was looking, and then I got bought a new pair of trainers for my birthday, and I was like, oh no, I'm fine. Like, I don't like, again, we don't have to be buying into the stereotypes of cups of tea at the pub and cardigans. You can still wear funky trainers. You can still, so like you said, like some of the best people I know and some of the people I follow on Instagram are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they all look spectacular. So like you said, it's all in your head.
It is in your head. You also go that, I will admit though, that I worked out the couple of things that I could keep no matter what age I was. Like teeth are going to be really important. You keep them going. Keep a nice sharp haircut.
Yeah.
And shoes like you. I'm like, those things, no one's ever going to stop me having nice teeth, decent hair, and a nice pair of shoes. The rest, who knows what might happen. Between teeth and shoes, a lot could go wrong. But I'm going to stick with the extremities and work them to the max. That's what I'm going to do.
What a great meme that will be. I'd love to see that in between teeth and shoes. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, that might be the name of my next show.
It's so true, though. It is. It's funny actually mentioning teeth. I was at the Tate Modern last summer, and I was with a friend of mine, Rachel. And
throw that little middle class snippet.
Yeah, no,
it's not even a thing.
It doesn't matter where I was, but it does matter because
it does now.
I was with Rachel and her son, and her son said, "Let's race," and we were in the basement of the Tate Modern. It's all concrete. And so everything looks the same. And I didn't have my glasses on, so couldn't see. And we were running, and I ran full pelt into one of the concrete pillars because it looked the same as the floor, and I didn't.
And they are
it.
sturdy pillars.
Yeah. It was like I was like Han Solo at the other side, in when he was frozen. And I fucked my tooth, and I know it's going to be an issue later.
Which one?
On.
I can't see from here. Let's have a.
No, you can't see it. It's just I know it's.
Is it dead?
Up. No, it's not dead, but something. I've got a feeling something's going to happen with it.
My advice is, as a person, as your senior by 3 years, sort that shit out because that's all you've got.
Yeah. Well, as you just said, it's important.
Don't let you. If you're going around with a brown tooth and 50, you're fucked. So forget what I said about ageism.
Yeah. Sort your teeth out, son.
Sort your bloody teeth out, mate.
But you've had a spectacular life. When I always like to look. Obviously, you look at what you look into who the guests are, and you've done some incredible things. And to be in the positions you've held. You must have come across all manner of isms at the time.
Do you know, it's really funny you say that because I talk. One of the reasons I most get booked as a speaker is the fact that I'm a kind of boardroom career person who's reinvented as a comic. So people like that story. And also, I think people have realised that they need to start booking different demographics for their keynote speeches, their after dinner speeches. It's a very white male world.
Yeah.
So thankfully, the speaker bureaus and the clients have woken up to the fact that they need to shimmy out of that space. But so one of the things that gets me booked is that I was the youngest and only female member of the ITV board. And that's only because I ran a production company that got bought by ITV. I had no boardroom aspirations. I was a kind of creative who got lucky. So my life went from being a sort of creative person in production to being a boardroom person in business. And on paper, that was in my early 30s. On paper, that looks like a really successful time in my career. I sat on a board alongside David Cameron. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, for starters. And David Cameron was like everyone on that board. They were Etonians. They were white, privileged men. It was pale, male and stale in the extreme. And I was the anomaly. And it looks like, oh, well done you, good for you. But I always say when I do speeches and stuff, I'm like, that is one of the reasons I get booked for stuff, because that was the start of my kind of more meteoric kind of rise in media. But it was also the time I became a single mum and split up with my kid's dad, and felt so inadequate that I would kind of cry myself to sleep. And I didn't tell anyone that. I felt massively vulnerable. I was suffering from imposter syndrome on an epic scale. And I think what then happened was I commenced kind of 15, 20 years of, not fraud, because I think I did my job really well, but I was just coping. So I almost feel like there's two stories. And for me, money never blew my skirt up. I've never cared about money as long as I've got enough not to worry, which I know is a huge privilege. A lot of people don't have enough money not to worry. If I'm not worried about money, as in I can pay the bills, I'm fine. I don't do lavish things. I don't need to. I don't want to. So money doesn't matter to me. Status never mattered to me. I never felt like I was a senior vice president of a big Hollywood studio. I felt like I was borrowing that job title. And I knew I was being put at the front of planes because they were paying. And there would be a time when I'd be at the back of the plane, like by the toilet again, which is now where I, reside when I fly. So I never believed any of that. It never really mattered to me, even though I loved my job and I loved the people and I loved the content of my job, but I didn't really care about the trappings. But the only thing I think, if the other night I was doing a gig and I was emceeing, and there was a couple in the audience and they'd been married 56 years. And that is successful. I know that sounds kind of naff, but I'm like, okay, I don't know what their lives are like. I don't know how good their marriage is, but they were there with their kids and their grandkids. And I'm like, to me, that is an interesting story. And if I could sit with you guys, George and Holly or whatever they were called, that would be interesting. So I know it sounds trite, but the things that really matter, like feeling okay and having someone in your life that matters, who you've managed to hold on to, I'd say anyone listening who's done that has had a lot more of a successful life than I've had, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely, it makes sense. It must have been hard though, like you say, like balancing the two things, like your home life and your work life, because they're both such high power things that you have to deal with. So, and you were saying about like you were crying and things like that, but you obviously dealt with it. You obviously had it in you you had your moments where you were like, oh, this is insane, but you just kind of found the strength within yourself to keep going.
Well, people used to say that at the time as well, because my son, as you may know, is autistic. And so we went through what it is to bring up a neurodiverse kid, which is definitely a whole other layer of complication emotionally, but it's also a really practical thing. Anyone whose kids might now be getting diagnosed as autistic will be finding out that you get the diagnosis, but you don't get anything else. You don't get a manual and here's some help. You get told your kid's autistic. You're then thinking, oh, right, now the help will swing in. No, it doesn't. And you'll be lucky if there's a special needs provision at your kid's local school, let alone anything further than that. So I became the special needs coordinator at one of my son's schools for a year because there wasn't an adequate one for the job, not because I'm some saintly person, because I needed to get my son through what was going to be difficult. We kept him in mainstream state education, and we made that decision to do that. But so when people say you're strong, I'm always wary of, like, yes, I kept it all going and I brought the kids up and they've turned out all right, largely thanks to them being amazing kind of human beings. But I think those strategies, I remember when I dropped my son off at college, so he went to college when he was 19 and he was there, it was like an animal college. He's a zookeeper now. He was always obsessed with animals, and it was a really safe, pastorally supportive environment, and a lot of kids who work with animals happen to be neurodiverse. It's just a thing, and so there was lots of support at this college, and it was like a Hogwarts for animals in the middle of the Bedfordshire countryside. And I dropped him off and it hit me like, in the solar plexus, like it does everybody. And then I just sat and thought, I can't drive. Actually, I can't actually drive. Well, I got halfway down the drive and there was a cattle grid and then a bunch of bloody thick sheep just stood. I couldn't drive anyway because I was like, well, you're not getting out of the way. But there was almost like a PTSD reaction because I suddenly could breathe again. I was like, right, I've coped with it. And I did then go through a period of quite intense mental health problems, and they had been storing up and they were going to come out. That and my strategies for coping reached their sell-by date, and my mind and my body were like, you are dealing with this shit now. And I did, and I had a very difficult 5 years where it all there's a quote in an Alan Bennett play, Habeas Corpus, and the quote is, the sky was dark with the wings of chickens coming home to roost. And the chickens bloody came home to roost. So yeah, I always, anyone listening, who's like a single parent or struggling, there is great strength in telling people you're struggling and asking for help, and knowing that sometimes leaning into feeling really shit about things and being overwhelmed is completely fine. I wish someone had said that to me. You don't have to know how to do it. You're allowed to just throw your hands up in the air and go, I'm overwhelmed and I feel shit, and ask for some support. So I don't completely wear it as a badge of honor, to be honest, if I think about it.
But
if that makes sense.
But even then, you still, like you said, to reach out is so hard. I read a thing yesterday, and it was saying about like reaching out to people to see if they're all right. And it's so hard to even do that. Especially if it's someone you haven't spoken to for a while and it kind of builds up and you're like, oh, I've really got to speak to that person. But then you get in your own way. And the same is with reaching out. Like you said, you don't want to admit that you're struggling. But I remember when I turned around one day and like you said about, I could feel I could feel my mental health dwindle, like really, it was almost like buckling. I could feel it. And I remember saying like, I'm hanging on by my fucking fingertips and I don't know what to do. And as soon as I said that, it kind of it almost like the relief and the release of the pressure was so great just by saying that, you know. And I think it is very important to tell people, but it's so hard, isn't it?
And do you know but what you said is the absolute most important thing, because what we don't do is even tell ourselves. So I think the thing that I've had some really intensive help the last 5 years. A bit more than 5 years. I'd say I've had a couple of much better years, but I had 5 very, very difficult years in and out of psychiatric hospitals for quite intensive help, group therapy, day in, day out for quite a long period at one time. Couldn't really work at that point. So I had a full-on, I don't know if you'd call it burnout, what you'd call it, which, by the way, I do also think is quite connected to perimenopause and menopause, and I wish we understood that better in women. A lot of women go through those periods at the same time I did, so I think we also need to be much more cognizant of that as a society. But either way, whatever was personal, whatever was hormonal and more collective, the thing that I most learned in all of that, and still do, is once you've acknowledged it. So if I wake up, yesterday I woke up and had I still get some bad days. And I woke up and I just thought, oh shit, the black dog is yapping quite hard in my ear. I'm feeling absolutely knackered. Physically, I don't feel good. I'm fuzzy of head. And the first thing I did was go, right, just notice it. How are you feeling then? What's going on? Have a look around the room, metaphorically. And then once I realised, physically I've got these signs, mentally, and I felt totally overwhelmed. I didn't think I could do anything. And then I just thought, well, maybe you can't today, then who knows? And I had a big thing in the afternoon that was going to pay me enough for the month, and I needed it. So I wasn't like in a privileged position of, just go back to bed and watch a film. But do you know what? Accepting it and letting it in makes it so much less powerful. And that's what mindfulness is, isn't it? You're just letting it all flow through you. And I keep saying that to my daughter at the moment. She's always got some bloke thing going on because she's 21 and she's out in Madrid having fun. There's always someone that's the love of her life who's broken her heart every kind of 2 weeks. And I was trying to say to her, I said, Elle, the thing is, what you're not able to do, if you could just sit with this, just tonight, don't go out and go clubbing and drink, just see what this feels like, just for tonight, because you will survive. Yeah. And just notice how you're feeling and that it feels shit and you feel empty and you think you'll never be loved again. And then tomorrow go out and do, but just allow a little bit of that feeling in, or you're just playing chase, aren't you? If I'm just going to knock that feeling out. That's why people drink, self-medicate, eat, whatever. We've all got a thing we do that's self-medication that isn't particularly helpful. We all harm ourselves in whatever way it is. Everyone's got that in them. And it's because we're so scared of ourselves. So I think what you said, that's the most, if your starting point is this is how I feel and I feel shit and I don't know how to do this, then it becomes much easier to know what to do about that and who to ask. But it's when we're telling ourselves, that kind of, buck up, you'll be all right. It's like, well, no, maybe you won't today. Maybe you're not all right. And maybe that's absolutely fine as well. Yeah. But God, it's taken me, half a century to get anywhere near any of this. And I'm still totally a work in progress. There's nothing redemptive about this story for sure.
But it is ongoing, isn't it? The whole thing, this comes up quite a lot because life is hard and no one tells you that. It's all the other way. You can be wherever you want. Just follow your dreams and blah, blah. And you're like, it's fucking hard and things are going to get in your way. And, if I'd have been told that at an early age, maybe things would have been a bit different.
I think the thing I do try and say to my kids is, and my son, it's hard spitting a kind of neurodiverse kid out into the world. It's not as easy for him. And And I feel very mindful, not in a patronising way. He's enormously resilient and talented, so I'm not trying to take away from his capacity. But I'm also aware that some things that might seem a bit easier to someone neurotypical are a little bit harder for him sometimes. And when he struggled, like when he left after Christmas, we had a sort of family Christmas together, but because he works in a zoo, the animals don't take Christmas off. So you don't get long off, they still need feeding and looking after. So he only got 2 nights off. So we were all still here, my parents, and he had to leave, and he got quite tearful and then he got home and felt really tearful. He lives in a kind of bed sit, like a kid would when they're first out in the world. And I just said to him, but this is what you're feeling is completely real.
Yeah.
And it feels completely difficult, and you might feel shit tonight, tomorrow, for a few days, but you totally are resilient enough to do this. So it's not about getting rid of those feelings. It's knowing they do pass, and you can sit in them. And I just wish someone had said that to me when I was younger, like, you feel shit today. It's like when you go for a run and it feels really hard. I remember the guy that trained me I've done a couple of marathons, and the first London Marathon I did, this obsessive runner trained me. And he said, when you're doing your 22-mile training runs, you'll get to like mile 13 and go, I cannot fucking do this. It hurts too much. I can't do another 9 miles feeling like this. He said, but you won't feel like that for the whole 9 miles. It will get easier again, and then it will get harder again. And I thought, God, that's such a good metaphor, isn't it? So like, it'll pass. Even if you do nothing to help yourself, you are not going to feel shit every minute of your life for the rest of your life. So you could just let it be, and something will change. But I think we get so impressed by being in the grip of despair and depression, we don't even let it pass, because we're like, I've got to get rid of this, beat it out with a bloody stick, because it's dangerous, it's going to derail me, I won't survive. Once you know you can survive it, and I know very sadly not everyone does survive depression, but most of us do. Once you know that, then I think there's a whole different framework for how you feel in it, because it's not everything. It's not the end of your story, it's just a bit of your story. Does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense. I know it was a couple of weeks ago, I was just crippled with it, and and like you said, you don't think you're ever going to feel better. You just feel that's it now. I'm always going to just be this. I couldn't see there was no light at the end of the tunnel, nothing was happening. And then I just happened to be at a gig, and my mate John was there, and he said, how are you? And I actually told him. And then he went, yes, you know what, Rich? He goes, you do a whole podcast about reaching out and talking to people. He goes, but you're the fucking worst at it. And I went, yeah, I know. I said, I don't follow my own advice. I find it really, because I don't want to burden people with it. And through talking to him, he went, right, okay. He goes, listen, I can help you with that. And he did. And this thing that had been hanging over me for a year, he sorted out in a night.
Well, there's something altruistic about helping other people, isn't there? So if you're someone who'll help someone when they're depressed, you're being, it is an act of altruism, but it's also a really kind of self-serving act, because you do that, all the kind of hormones we get from running and whatever, you do actually get happy, kind of all the dopamine sort of hit from doing things for other people. You definitely do. So actually, we're being really nice. We're going, listen, I'm giving you a dopamine hit, I'm going to give you all my shit, you can solve it, and you're going to feel great at the end of it. But but it is, I mean, do you find, because sometimes when I'm feeling really shit, I do have really good gigs. It's so weird. And I think because I'm so relieved to be on stage, I'm like, I'm totally going to inhabit this 20 minutes, because I'm getting out of my own bloody internal spiraling, and I'm going to enjoy being with you guys in the room, and it's like a relief, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely that. It's absolutely that. I said this to someone the other day. I feel better on stage than I do when I'm off, because I haven't got to worry about bills and tax and all that. I've just got to talk to you about these stupid stories for 20 minutes. And I said in Invisible, I had I can't remember how I made it funny, but it was basically, the premise was, I do this for a living. I'm on stage day in, day out, because I find life off stage so bloody difficult. And there's complete truth in that. So like days like today, where I'm doing a podcast with you, I'm doing a speech this afternoon, and then I'm opening a gig this evening, I will know today then I will have had 2.5 good hours, because I'm doing things I like, where I'm not in my own head. Yeah. God knows what the other 18 waking hours will be like. But those 2.5 hours, I know I'm going to enjoy. So trouble is, you can't be on stage 16 hours a day. So what do fuckwits like us do the rest of the time? That's the tricky bit. We stare at the wall, letting the voices engulf us until the next thing we have to go and do.
I know, but it does feel you're a much more seasoned act than I am, and a loved and lauded act for good reason. But do you find that you I'm trying to find ways to bring in, like, I can't quite get as far as, I did talk a bit about depression in one of my shows, but not really in a way I wanted to. I look back at it, I'm like, I wish I hadn't done that because I didn't get really close to what I wanted to say. But I am talking about anger at the moment, and I'm a very unangry person,
Right.
Genuinely not an angry. I don't get angry very easily, and I've now got stuff I remember the times I've got angry because there's been so few of them, and actually I thought there's some quite funny stuff in those because and my kids remind me of one. There's one time I totally lost my shit and they remind me of it. They sent me a card to remind me of it because they remember the day it happened. And I'm like, actually that's a badge of honor as a parent if you've only done it once. But so I'm trying to go near thinking about what really goes on, and so people who know me on stage wouldn't think I'd be an angry person who like lose my shit like that because that's not how I come across. But do you go near your sort of vulnerability and what's really going on under the mask then on stage?
Yeah, someone said I was painfully honest, they said.
Okay.
Because I do. It's funny, actually. I was doing a podcast a little while ago and they said, can you tell us a secret that you've never told anyone before? And I couldn't think of anything because I talk about everything that I've been through, my good bits, my bad bits, especially my bad bits. I've talked about it on the podcast a lot. If people listen to all the episodes, at some point I've told you everything that I've been and done and said, and has happened. And
that'll come out in your material as well, in one shape or form.
Yeah, and you're talking about, because I was angry when I was younger, but then having counselling made me realise why I was angry. I'm not a horrible angry person. It's just that things had happened that had frustrated me to the point of me losing my shit.
You were angry because you were sad, probably.
Yeah, and then you work out why and what had happened to get you to that point. And then, like being with people and then be like, oh, you're so angry, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm fucking no. But now I've gone so far the other way.
So you're not angry now?
No, I'm so chilled out. And I think when I've been at my angry, it's not pleasant. Because I do have a temper when I'm really pushed. I do have a temper. It doesn't come out very often, but when it does, it's catastrophic. And
how will it come out then? What's the catastrophic? I should be saving this for when you come on my podcast.
Yeah.
But how does it come out then?
I will shout and holler and I'll say horrible things that I don't mean, and I've thrown things. That was years ago.
So it's like a kind of Hulk.
Yeah.
Thing.
And it's not pretty, and I'm not proud of it. But it doesn't come out very often now. Like I say, I'm to the point. Someone said to me the other day, they were like, "You're too chilled out. Like, do you give a fuck?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do give a fuck." But you'll know when I'm really fucked off, and you don't want that. You just keep it like this. What do you want me to do?
But do you know the risk? I don't know where you're at with this, and maybe it's too raw, and I don't know what your setup is now, whether you're with anyone or not. But I think it's in intimate relationships, the stakes are so high. Like, I will forgive my friends anything. I've got friends I've had my whole life, so everyone around me, I feel I can navigate an honest, authentic relationship with, apart from people I'm with, where I seem to go into this kind of like, weirdly, the more intimate you're supposed to be allowed to be, the more I think I'm just so scared of abandonment and losing that person that I just find it incredibly hard to let that snail without a shell bit show. It's a bit like you can have a really intimate conversation with somebody who you sit next to on a plane who you'll never see again, and you might tell them everything. Yeah. But I would find that harder to tell a partner. And I don't know where you're at in terms of that. Kind of, that's a really hard thing, right? It's not. You kind of, your wise mind gets wiser as you get older, but it doesn't necessarily help you change the habits of a lifetime, does it? No. And do those things that really matter, because those connections are perilous, right? Yeah. Because if you're going to let yourself be seen, then you're going to really go, well, can anyone love me if they really see me? And then if they do, you could lose it again. Yeah. So
true. Yeah.
Tinder can't answer those fucking questions for us, can it?
I think, again, that comes with age as well. I am happier within myself, with who I am. Whereas before, I always felt I wasn't good enough. I wasn't intelligent enough. I wasn't this. I wasn't that. But now I'm older, and I kind of go, actually, no, I'm all right. Actually, yeah, I feel I'm actually happy with who I am, and I think that also helps with your inner turmoil and your maybe your temper and things like that, because you're not frustrated anymore. You're like, oh no, I'm all right. This is nice. Yeah, and I think that comes with age.
There's a lot of tension between who you're pretending to be and who you are, and I think if that gap is big, at a certain point something's going to implode. So that's kind of, you've got to close those gaps somehow. But sometimes the person we are, we don't even know who we are. We think we're being the person we are, and then we're like, but I didn't really know who I was anyway, so I thought I was being authentic. But it is a kind of life's quest. It's like catching a cloud. You're like, I think I've got to it, and oh no, I don't know what I'm doing still. I'm still completely fucked after all these years.
But you're never going to suss it out, because we're always changing. So I've said this loads of times on here, that there isn't a destination. You just evolve to wherever you're at the time, and you become a different person as you're going along, and then you're not here anymore. There isn't really a state of, this is what I was searching for that whole time.
Well, the Buddhist thing is the moment is now, isn't it? Because you keep thinking, if I just get that bit of telly, if I just get that, if I just get the hot partner, if I just get this, if my kids do this, if I get that. And you're always thinking, once that happens, I'll be all right. And then you realise, no, today is the day. Like, today is the day. You do not know what's happening tomorrow. No. Although I am getting a puppy. That's what's going to help me.
Nice.
I'm getting a puppy.
Amazing.
Be like having a newborn baby that never leaves home. That's
there we are. You're filling that. You're plugging that gap.
I am. Empty nest cliche much?
Yeah, let me fill it with living things.
Exactly. A living thing that will shit everywhere and really irritate me.
But we're also with relationships, like my last relationship was very volatile. And I think because of that, like the chemistry was so bad between us a lot of the time. Very strong-minded, and it was very
fighting or fucking.
Yeah, we're mostly fighting, and
that's a shame. You need the balance.
You do need the balance, but because of that, because it was so volatile. Now I'm out of that, and I'm away from it. I'm again. That helps me be even more chilled. I'm like, I really don't want to be that person again, and in an environment like that. So now I'm just like pretty zen about most things. I'm like, no, this is cool. I'm not fighting with anyone now, so nice. That helps.
Your headspace goes, I think I realised that it was a conversation with someone else my age who was talking about her patterns of dating, and I realised that since I was 14, when I first fell in love with someone, Nick Young, who I was with from 14 to 16, I've always had men in my life. Yeah. Well, and sometimes women, but more often men. And it was almost like, this is the first time in my life there's not even any blokes on the horizon where I'm like, yeah, maybe, because I'm not interested. Like, if those things are coming up, I'm just not pursuing them at the moment. And I feel like I've had squatters in my head, usually in the form of men who I've let in. They didn't break in. And I'm like, do you know what? There's that whole bit of my brain that feels free. It's not that I'm never going to date again at all. I'm sure I will. But I've never felt less urgency and less interest in being in any way validated by whether or not someone thinks I'm attractive and wants to fall in love with me. And it's taken me till I'm nearly 53 to go, no, do you know what? I don't want those rooms for rent in my brain right now. I'm not interested. I want to just keep it for other things. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean. It's such a minefield.
When Ryan Gosling calls me, I'll be like, do you know what, Ryan? The rooms are open again.
In you come, son. In you come.
It's all right. Yours, carpeted, furnished, ready for you. But until then...
It's just got pictures of him on the wall as well, which is weird.
Exactly. Sorry, it looks a bit stalky in you, Ryan.
It's a bit shriny. But
make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, in you come. But you mentioned menopause earlier. Yeah. And this is the thing... that, like, I don't know if it's different now, but when I was growing up, we weren't really told about women and what it is to be a woman and what women have to go through. You know, we were just, you knew about periods, but you didn't really know. You didn't really know. It's I've said it on here before. I've only recently found out. I really understand the whole cycle now, that it isn't just that week when, you know, you're a little bit grumpy and things are changing. It's just a continual cycle.
There's always something going on.
There's always something going on. And then you get to that point when your body starts to go, right, well, you're not going to be having kids. So this is changing now, and you're getting to this point, and then your whole body's changing again. And we've never told about that. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I actually left my boardroom career 3 years ago, finally, partly because comedy and other stuff had tipped me into a place where I could, and partly because it had run its course. And the one conversation I never ever had at board level was a really important one, which is I can't fucking do this at the moment because I'm going through the menopause. And I didn't realise that was such a significant bit of what was going on. And the thing that there's a couple of things about this, and thank God it is much more coming into sort of common parlance. People are talking about it. There was stuff in the press yesterday about HRT becoming available over the counter, estrogen pills, because that's also really hard to get. A lot of women are fighting to get estrogen. Brexit has stopped a certain number of the patches for estrogen, which is what most women use coming in. Yeah. There's been supply chain problems with HRT. If there were supply chain problems with insulin, it would have been addressed, but it wasn't addressed. Or not addressed urgently. So there's a couple of things with it. One is the perimenopause. And if there's one thing I just keep banging my drum about, is that women from their mid-40s will very likely be in perimenopause. And the mental health problems that women go through in their 40s are phenomenal and very much connected. A lot of women get diagnosed with bipolar in their 40s and 50s. And they think that's a combination of the fact that women are good at, a lot of people can mask bipolar. So maybe their masking didn't work because they were going through so many other things. So maybe genuinely they reveal themselves as bipolar, but also a lot of them aren't bipolar, they're perimenopausal and diagnosed as bipolar. Also women commit suicide. The higher statistics for women's suicides 50 to 54. Oh, wow. And the average age for menopause is 51. So while we're looking at terrible statistics and things like the Lions Barber Collective about mental health for men, and that's so important. And you doing this is so important. But what about looking at where the peaks are for women to struggle with their mental health? So I think the things that are so that is a statistic. You may not have heard it. A lot of your listeners won't have heard it. Why haven't we heard it? And also, why are we not realizing that for women, we hemorrhage a lot of talented women in jobs as well. I do a lot of speaking about removing barriers to women at senior levels in a lot of different industries. I do a lot of work in that area. And we lose women to having kids, so they go and become carers for their kids because we're not as supportive as we think we are, for mothers being still the primary carers a lot of the time, not taken away from amazing dads out there. And then we lose women through perimenopause and the menopause. And women are at the top of their game then. Women at 45 onwards, they're going to be the best lawyer, the best person in the boardroom, the best person managing a shop because they've done it for a long time. So why are we letting that happen? So I feel really strongly that, and they do have, Channel 4's got a great on-screen menopause policy and a great off-screen menopause policy. Ogilvy have got one. Yeah. There's lots of companies that now do. But what does it mean and what are we doing? Because we can't just say, oh, yeah, it's a thing. Okay, so what are you doing to support women? What are you doing with diversity of getting women going through that into your workforce, onto your screens? So, yeah, I do feel really passionately that we're doing a bit about it, but it isn't just Davina McCall telling us about hot flushes. And I know she does a lot more than that. It isn't just that. It's like there's real stories and real people really not able to earn a living. Yeah. And really not able to hold down a relationship and really not able to parent their kids or look after their own parents because of this. So I do feel that there's a lot more work to be done on it. Yeah. No,
absolutely. And like I say, men just haven't been told about it. And so a lot of men, they'll go, well, what's nothing to do with me? That's women's things. I don't know. And you feel them, you see them physically recoil when you mention that. If a comedian mentions it on stage, you feel the audience go, oof.
Do you know what, though? I don't think I've seen comedians mention it on stage I mention it on stage. And so I've seen a lot of people do it. And it's just also like everything. It's how you bring it in. You could talk about prostate cancer in a way that the audience is like, oh, my God, please don't talk about that. I lost my dad to that. Yeah. Or you could bring it in a way where people go with you and then you do something clever with it. And I definitely haven't found, like, I do talk about menopause on stage, but it comes in such a way that it's still part of a gag, but I am saying some things that matter with it, but it's funny. So I just think we almost also wait for the world to recoil from us telling those stories. Right. And then we maybe, you know what it's like with stand-up, you just go in guns blazing and own that shit. Yeah. And this is what I'm saying, and this is who I am. I think you were the one who said to me when I was talking about, I think you said after we gigged it up the creek, and I was at the time saying, you said, oh, you've got teenage kids then? And I said, no, my kids are in their 20s. You said, but you talk about them as teenagers. And I said, because I think if I admit my kids are in their 20s, everyone's going to be like, God, how old are you? And it will alienate them. But actually, I now do talk about that. And I say it right from the get-go and I have a good gag about it. And then no one gives a shit. And people my kids' age aren't going, oh, you're not funny. So I think it's also, like get out of your own way thing. We need to also just talk about it. But yeah, when I hear men, like occasionally you do hear blokes going, my wife's going through the menopause and it's kind of really shit and Christ, and I'm thinking, oh, is shit? And is that really fucking hard for you, is it? having to deal with that? Oh, poor you. Maybe go and have an affair then, because it sounds awful.
Poor you.
That must be dreadful for you, having to watch her have night sweats and lose her fucking mind. So,
but that's it.
So yeah,
it's not. We don't get talked about. Like, we get into relationships with people, and to have that information would be so fucking handy. Just to know. I mean, now we can Google it and we can find out. But if you don't even know to look for it, then, to research it, I mean, you're just not aware. Not just aware. You're not just aware. So it would be helpful, I think, at a younger age to be told, like, look, this is what happens. This is what goes on. Just to have a better understanding of it, and then to know to go and look for it, to research it. So you can, if you're in a relationship with somebody, you can be more helpful. Just by understanding what's happening will help you in that relationship.
Definitely. And I think, my son definitely is very painfully aware of menopause, because he lived in the house, with me and his sister. So he's heard about it, and a lot of kids his age have. But it's also about, if what you're getting is people saying, when you've got people on dating profiles, and I know this is talked about a lot, women will know this, you'll probably know this, it's a classic sort of red flag. If a bloke on a dating profile goes, no baggage, please, no emotional baggage, you're like, fuck you, actually, because what you're saying is you just want gloss and froth and like the nice side of me. And I can give that to an audience, but I'm not giving it to, I'll give you that, but I'll give you the whole of me, and you'll give me the whole of you, hopefully. So while you've got that kind of no emotional baggage, please, it's very hard for anyone to have permission, whatever you're set up in life, to actually go, well, this is me actually, and it is a bloody mess, but maybe you can love the mess. So I think there is, menopause is it's messy, it's painful, it's depressing, it's volatile. So are lots of things in life. So I think if we can just make it part of what we all talk about, but crucially, it's less a thing in our industry, because you can bring yourself a bit more to your work, can't you? That's kind of what we do to a degree on stage. But I don't know how women like run massive law firms through their 40s and into their 50s. I could not keep doing the boardroom job I had, largely because of that. Now I think I could do it again. I'm kind of almost out the other side of menopause now, and I think I'd probably be all right. I don't want to do it. I get asked to do those kind of jobs, and I definitely won't ever do one again. But so it's a really important thing to talk about, and we've only just scraped the surface of it, I think, in terms of where we're at with it as a society. So my next big drum to bang would be perimenopause, and women who are a lot younger who are like, oh, it can't be menopause. It's like, no, you're going through something that for a lot of women feels shitter than menopause, which is the perimenopause. So that's probably the most menopause chat you've ever had on this podcast. You're welcome.
But it needs talking about. That's why we do this. That's why we do Fembrain, which is, it's part of the insane and membrane thing, because
I thought men was for menopause. I thought it was insane in the membrane.
It's literally an hour and a bit talking about menopause every week.
That's what I thought. It's like, good for you, Rich. What a guy. What an ally to the cause.
Then I was like, what's his fucking game? What's he up?
Exactly. What's he trying to do?
What's he hiding? This is why we do it, because I don't, like I said, I wasn't told about these things when I was growing up. I don't really know obviously I don't know what it's like to be a woman. So having these conversations helps me, and hopefully it helps people listening. Because a lot of the time we don't know how to ask the questions. I say all the time, ask questions, but then I do a job that means I'm a bit more. I have a few more skills that enable me to be able to feel comfortable asking questions, whereas other people that don't do, like public speaking, don't really have those skills. So this is why I do. This is why we do it. And it's really.
And if you ask a menopausal woman the wrong question, she'll bite your fucking head off, all right, Rich? Because we're not in a good mood for about 7 years at that point, so don't piss us around. Be careful how you phrase it.
You got to do it from a distance.
I would do it. You'd be careful. Be very, very careful.
But there's even when my ex would she would become a different person when she would start her period. I remember seeing the shutters come down in mid-sentence. Like, we'd be talking, and then I just see.
You'd be like, oh, an egg's just gone.
Yeah, and you're like, and she would, and it's an actual thing. It's I can't remember what it's called. I think it's a syndrome where you just ask somebody else, and I just saw her just staring at me, and I'm like, fuck, we're doing that again.
Hormones are very powerful things. And I know that, there's been a lot of research. I've been on HRT. I had done surgery when I was in my 30s that led to me going into kind of early menopause. So I was on HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I've been on it for nearly 20 years, which they do say you should not be on it for that long because it's associated with breast cancer and other risks. But I will honestly say that how I feel without it is so bad and so dark at the moment still. Hopefully I'm moving through it. But I'm not taking lightly the risk of cancer. But if you're saying to me you can live as you were feeling without it, or you can have a small % risk of breast cancer, I will take the risk. Wow. And that's not I'm aware of what a terribly serious thing that is. And so many people I know and have got breast cancer or have died from breast cancer or are recovering from breast cancer. But it's such it's not possible to kind of, for me, it doesn't feel possible to go through this without help in the form of hormones. So I'm jacked up on bioidentical hormones to get through it. And I'm still doing battle with doctors to be allowed to keep taking them because they've been on them just too long now. And I'm like, well, I would really rather take my chances, thank you, and keep living with a well mind because I couldn't live how I was before. I couldn't live without them. The world fell apart. Yeah. It's like taking someone who's, bipolar and got bipolar medication going, well, we'd rather you did without it now. And I'm going, I can't actually at the moment. So, I'm obviously going to need to wean myself off this stuff at some point, probably within the next couple of years. But it's essential, for me and the difference in hormones. Yeah. I could bore you about hormones for a whole other podcast, but it's really hard to go through it on your own, and women it's a bit like women get told, you're a failure if you can't breastfeed and you should be able to just breastfeed. Why are you giving your kid a bottle? Just do what you fucking need to do. It's fine. Yeah. You're doing your best. You're fine. And it's the same with HRT. If you need it to get through it, bloody take it. If you feel strongly that you want to do it with other mechanisms, that's totally great as well. It's all good, but we don't need to judge people who do it a certain way. Do what you need to do, don't you?
Absolutely. And I think that's a brilliant way to finish. Fucking smashed.
Well, thanks for having me on, Rich.
It was lovely. My pleasure. Absolute
Paul can
pleasure.
cut like 5 minutes of the menopause chat. You'll still get more than enough.
I don't think he's there anymore. I think he's gone.
No, I had to go and deal with a prostate situation of having to go to the loo for the second time during this podcast. So there we are.
Oh, nice.
Really?
You see, I'm a menopausal woman with a pelvic floor of steel. That could also be a name of one of my shows.
Yeah, there you go. You have so many ideas. It's really good. Where can we find you on the socials?
So I'm at Callie Beaton Comedian on Instagram and at Callie Beaton on Twitter. So yeah, and obviously my podcast Namaste Motherfuckers, which you're coming on in a couple of weeks.
Yes, I am.
So
yes, I am.
You can get me back and just talk about your balls and your asshole for an hour.
That's all I talk about anyway. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been lovely. And have a great talk this afternoon. I hope it goes well.
I will. They won't know what's hit them, will
You're all
they?
pumped up now, ready to go.
Oh, ready to go. Not looks wise. I will put a frock on, but yes, ready to go.